Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the pre-show, writing lesson pre-show for the book study stream that'll be here at about 10. So when I look at these two passages, the things I want to focus on is getting back to the idea of the opening of a short story. So remember the first time we did this, that's actually what we were talking about. We were talking about things to put into the opening to catch the reader. And I don't really know for sure if these are short stories or novels. I mean, they might be novels. I don't know. But it's important to catch the reader up front. And there are certain things you want to do for that. So I'm actually going to read you the beginning of one of my short stories. Again, a different short story after we look at these. But there are things that you want to put right up front that are eye-catching for the reader. We talked about tension and stuff like that already. And we mentioned a little bit of this before, but today I want to really drill on the idea of using specifics, specifically color and numbers. That is something that'll really draw your reader in, giving them images. Because if I say to you, picture a truck driving down the road, maybe some of you pictured a truck driving down the road. If I say to you, picture a red truck driving down fresh black asphalt. Well, if you were paying attention to me at all there, you just pictured a red truck, whatever type of truck you pictured, and you could see the black asphalt. Our minds are geared to respond to concrete details like that. And in the opening of a story, when you're trying to convince the reader to continue on and read your piece, keep going with it, you want to engage their imagination as much as possible. Even if it takes your story a little while to, maybe you got some world building to get out of the way, but you'll have to weave that into scene anyway. The more you can engage the reader's imagination, that'll take away some of the fatigue. Because there's always, even if you're writing a science fiction piece or a fantasy piece, if you've got world building, there's the problem of keeping the reader's interest long enough for them to figure out what's going on and to learn about your world. Our human brains, we don't like being in a place of we don't know what's going on, especially if it's for a story and we're reading it and we're supposed to be having fun. This is something that we're, trying to do to enjoy. We don't like going for pages and pages without a real firm grasp on what's going on. At the same time, because we're just difficult like this as readers, we won't sit there and put up with somebody just writing page after page of, and then this happened in this universe, and this is the nature of this universe, and this is that universe. No, we won't do it. You've got to give us a story. You've got to give us a scene, engage us with action and whatnot. So fold that world building into it, but give us specific details. And then all the other things we've talked about thus far help as well. The strong active verbs, of course, keeping the sentence structure variety, going. And that's pretty smooth. So that's another thing that you need to worry about as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll start with Raphaels here. Let me share the screen. Let me go professor mode. Let me transform myself, speaking of transformers. And that, never mind that I said that. That could go in a weird place. All right, here we go. So hopefully you can read this. It's a sort of a lengthy text, and I had to make it kind of small. So I'm going to read, as always, if you're new to us when we do this, the left side of the screen is Kamikaze's there, or Raphael's original opening, and then the right side is my edited version. So I'll read his first, then I'll read mine, and we'll talk about some of the changes I made and why. All right, so Raphael's First. A rift opened in the air right above the small mound in the meadow. It looked like an enormous bullet pushed through a glass pane, leaving a wide black hole in the middle, but the cracks were glowing purple. The few animals in the area ran straight away, survival instinct kicking in. Then shouting came out from the rift. "Faster, baby girl, jump now, I'll hinder them," a grizzled male voice shouted. "I'm not going to make it," a female voice said. "Yes, you are, go now," the male voice replied. A teenager flew out of the hole and into the meadow, rolling in the tan grass as she fell. She wore something that resembling an astronaut suit, but had a tiger pelt on her head and a backpack on her shoulders. She looked back to the rift and shouted, "Dad, I got through." "Coming." A man dressed as a pirate, tricorn hat, cutlass and all, followed the girl from the rift. "Close it," the girl shouted. A gigantic green tentacle crossed the rift right after the pirate, flailing around aimlessly. "Close it now." From the ground, the pirate fidgeted with something strapped to his wrist. It looked like a watch with some dials on top. The rift expanded a bit and then suddenly closed, disappearing as if it were never there, cleaving the tentacle that flailed for a few more seconds and then stopped lifeless, oozing blood on the grass. All right, so great content-wise. I mean, that's an engaging scene. You've got an event to happen. The very first off, this rift opening, and then suddenly it's disturbing the peace of whatever's going around it, and then you've got this action just pouring through it. I mean, this father and daughter trying to escape through it. You've got this tentacle monster chasing them, so very engaging. At this point, we don't know anything about the rules of your universe or anything, but we get an idea this is going to be a fun ride. So we're definitely intrigued, and we want to hear more. Some of the changes I made, let me read my version of it, and then we'll talk about some of the specific changes I made. You can look for the changes I made as we go along here. Above a small mound in the meadow, a rift opened in the air with a boom. It looked like an enormous bullet hole in a glass pane. The edges glowed purple. A murder of crows took to the air, and 2 rabbits scurried away. Then shouting came from the rift. "Faster, baby girl, jump now, I'll hinder them," a grizzled male voice shouted. "I'm not going to make it," a female voice said. "Yes, you are. Go now," the male voice replied. A girl flew out of the hole into the meadow, rolling in the tan grass. She was no more than 16, wearing something that resembled an astronaut suit, but with a tiger pelt on her head and a backpack slung over her shoulder. She looked back to the rift and shouted, "Dad, I got through." "Coming," the voice replied. A man dressed as a pirate, tricorn hat, cutlass and all, followed the girl out of the rift. "Close it," the girl shouted. A gigantic green tentacle thrust out of the rift, flailing around aimlessly. "Close it now." The pirate fidgeted with something strapped to his wrist. It looked like a watch with dials on top. The rift expanded, then closed in a second as if it were never there. The tentacle fell to the grass, flailing for a few moments as blood oozed from the severed end. All right, so you can probably hear some of the changes I made there. I fixed up some sentence structure variety. I tried to help it flow a little bit more. I added some shorter sentences in there because it tended to have a few times there are too many long sentences back to back. But specifically on the opening there, so look at that. You've got a rift open in the air right above a small mound in the meadow. Okay. I changed this is one thing that writers today, if you look at your own writing even, now not everybody, but it's a tendency for most modern writers today to write subject, predicate, ordered sentences, and that's just about it. Maybe they end up being complex or compound sentences. That's fine. They can do that in the after effect, after the first predicate, but it ends up being subject, predicate. A rift opened. It looked. The few animals in the area ran. A teenager flew out. She wore. So this is something that you might not think of as a writer because you're trying to get the story out. And maybe you think, well, some of these sentences do roll into a complex sentence or a compound sentence or combination of the two, like I said. But to give the ear some real variety and to really engage the readers at a subconscious level that they don't even know they're being fatigued by, you want to start some sentences now and then with an introductory clause. And again, some people do this naturally. Some people need to kind of think about it. It's something I have to think about. I don't do it naturally. But then other people can overuse it too, so that's worth it. But that's what I did with the first sentence. Above a small mound in the meadow, a rift opened in the air with a boom. Now, I added the sound. You might not want the sound. You could take that out. But you had the animals running away. If there was no sound, I couldn't imagine them running away. So that's why I added the boom. You can change it to whatever you like. An enormous bullet hole in a glass pane. You had a lot of description that I didn't think was... You went to a length with your description that wasn't quite necessary, I thought. If you say bullet hole through a glass pane, we know the cracks are there. We can see that, That's very easy. So that's easily seen. So the edges glowed purple. But that's good. You've got the color in there. The purple, great. A murder of crows, that's actually what you call a flock of crows. So you could say flock if you don't think many people know murder. But I went ahead and said flock of crows because you don't really count a massive number like that. Because you just said animals. So I wanted to be specific. What animals? Give the reader something to picture. You could change these animals, of course. This is just something I threw in. Crows and then 2 rabbits scurried away. So that concrete number, 2 rabbits, they can picture that. They can picture the crows. If you just say animals in the area, which animals? Are we in a pasture like cows? Or are we in a meadow in a in between trees of a forest? So like foxes and stuff. What are we doing there? So just some specifics like that. That word hinder, I didn't take that out, but because I don't know these characters. Is he really a pirate? Or are these just sort of like dimension travelers or time travelers or something like that? And he happens to be dressed because of that. I don't know. But that word hinder is not a very natural word. I didn't take it out though, because maybe it's natural to his character wherever he came from. I just didn't know the details, but just something to bring up. You have a teenager flew out of the hole. This is something that's subtle. Okay, so a teenager flew out of the hole. That's a vague word. That can be anything. That can be any one of 10 ages or 9 ages. A teenager, 11 through 19. So that's a very vague word. Now I don't know what age you actually want her. I said a girl of no more than 16. Just to make it specific. If she's supposed to be younger or older, feel free to change that, obviously. But I said, a girl rather than teenager. That's sort of a vague word. And you want to give the impression, because you're acting as though you're omniscient narrator here. You planted your camera in this meadow and you're seeing this rift open. So you're not there with the people. You don't know what was going on before them. We're just kind of witnessing it as though we were one of the animals there in the meadow. So a teenager, you want to go ahead and say so a girl of no more than 16, that's how somebody might think of it if they were just sitting in the meadow and seeing it. You got great details, the astronaut suit, the tiger pelt. We definitely want to know what's going on there. I changed this, a subtle thing, but I changed the backpack to being on her shoulders to slung over her shoulder. You can change that if you don't like it, but it's a more concrete image. Backpack, you wear it, it's on your shoulders, it's on your back. So she was just wearing it. I just put it slung on her shoulder, just more of a concrete image. And in the end, I changed up. You had one really long sentence down there. So I just changed that a bit. The pirate fidgeted with something strapped to his wrist. It looked like a watch with dials on top. The rift expanded a bit, then closed in a second, as if it were never there. Again, that's that difference, or that closing that gap between narrative time and the real time. We talked about this a little bit last time. Narrative time is the time it takes the reader to read the story that you've written, and real time is the time it would take the actual events to occur. So in a tense moment like this, just reiterating what I said last time, you want to try to close the gap between narrative time and real time. So you had said the rift expanded a bit, then suddenly closed, disappearing as if it were never there. Well, suddenly closed, that's an adverb. You want to get rid of that if you don't need it. And then disappearing as if it were never there. I just changed that. The rift expanded a bit, then closed in a second, as if it were never there. So took out that adverb. The tentacle fell to the grass, flailing for a few moments as blood oozed from the severed end. So that's a great image, that red blood pouring out. You've already said the grass was tan, so we can already kind of picture that. So great use of color on your own. And some numbers there and whatnot. I just kind of put some more specifics in there along with everything we've been talking about, some active verbs and some sentence structure variety. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. Let me check on the chat here before I move on farther and see if anybody's got any other comments or thoughts. Or nope, not yet. You guys all must be enthralled by my my speech here. Looks like the camera's getting a little muddy, but that's not a big deal right now as long as I'm sharing the text. So hopefully the audio is still coming through okay. Drop me a note. Just let me know if the audio still sounds good, because again, I don't know how the generator should affect the Wi-Fi, but just because it's something different, go ahead and assure me there. And then we'll jump to the next passage, and then I'll show you my example of my own, just for another example of color and numbers and all of that. All right, good. Sound engraver, netter says audio is great. Good, that's good. All right, so even the camera's a little choppy. I can fix that too. I know how to do it when it's time. So, Troy, see Troy here with us too. Great. Cool. Thank you all. Thank you, Brian. All right, so now next up is back to the drawing boards. Hopefully that was helpful, Kamikaze. Oh, yeah, see, the audio was great there. Oh, Kamikaze, you do have a comment. The thing with the animals is that the characters are in another world, so rabbits and crows are not in the ballpark. Okay, yeah, okay, that's good. So this meadow on a mound is supposed to be from another world, so you wouldn't have crows or rabbits there. Totally fine. What you'd want to do in that case then, if there were any animals there that were the same as ours, you'd want to put them, or if not, you could say, like, imagine what kind of animals you'd have on that world. And you could say, like, a rabbit-like creature scurried off into the brush, or a fox-like creature or something like that. Just give the reader some kind of description to link it to. Even if it's an alien-like animal, give them something in their brains to sort of link it to. And then you can describe them later if they come back up. But yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you said that, because yeah, if it's an alien planet or another dimension, you wouldn't have those types of animals. Yeah, just give them some sort of description, very brief, but you could just change that to a flock of black birds, bird-like creatures, took to the air as two land mammals hopped away, or something like. I don't know. I'm just spitballing there, but you know what I mean. So yeah, just give them something to hang that on, and then you've got that. All right, cool. Glad that was helpful. Thank you very much, sir, for affirming that. Good. Let's go ahead and move on to Back to the Drawing Board. And just to remind you guys, Raphael and Back to the Drawing Board, I am going to post these on the thread where you posted it to begin with. I'll post my edited version as a reply to your original post. So you can have this, and you can use this. You can change what you want, do whatever. This is your free edited paragraph or two, for participating in the writing lesson. So that's how we're doing that. All right. So pretty cool sort of fantasy, maybe a little steampunk, I don't know, but a cool little tale here we've got the beginning of from Back to the Drawing Board. I'll go ahead and read his original part first on the left, and then I'll go ahead and read mine. The harsh afternoon sun hit Leonid Harper's eyes as soon as he stepped off the Argentum Express. Arum sanguis, he muttered, jamming his derby hat onto his head and adjusting it to block the light. Mountain air will be the death of me. Leonid did his best to ignore the SkyTrain as he stepped off the runner and onto solid ground again, the metal monstrosity creaking ominously as weight shifted and the frame cooled. In the recesses of his mind, Leonid knew exactly how much magic had driven the express off the ground in Leondale, how much sulfurite crystals had exhausted the fire within them to push the train over the mountains to the head of the MZ River, and exactly how much power now bled off the bottom of the cabin behind him in smoke and embers, wasted. He knew because the same spark burned in the back of his mind, whispering that he could gather all that lost fire together. It longed for purpose, for form, and if he just imagined how he wanted it to burn, but he ignored it. Leonid Harper's thoughts were his own. The fire was welcome to them only when he decided they were. He was here for a job. He headed into town to find his employer. All right, so great example of world building within a scene. He stepped off. He's thinking these things. After this, you'd want to get into a bit more action, let some people talk or let some things happen around him. You don't just want to stick in his head much longer than this at the beginning of the story, because then it gets a little stale in terms of the world building. But great content there for an opening. Somebody's here for a job. We don't know exactly what it is. Clearly, there's this thing of magic. He's got this possibility of some untapped power that tempts him or something like that. Really cool possibilities there. So this is what I changed it up with, and I'll just read it and then talk about the changes. The afternoon sun assaulted Leonid's eyes the moment he stepped off the Argentum Express. Arum sanguis, he muttered, jamming his derby hat onto his head to block the light. Mountain air will be the death of me. The metal monstrosity of the SkyTrain shifted and creaked as the frame cooled. Leonid did his best to ignore it. In the recess of his mind, he knew exactly how much magic had driven the express off the ground in Leondale, how many sulfurite crystals had exhausted their fire to push it over the mountains to the head of the MZ River. He knew exactly how much power now bled from the bottom of the cabin behind him in smoke and embers, wasted. The fire whispered in the back of his mind. He could gather all that lost power together. It longed for purpose, for form, and if he just imagined how he wanted it to burn, no. Leonid Harper's thoughts were his own. The fire was welcome to them only when he decided it was. He was here for a job. He turned to the right and headed into town to find his employer. All right, so a lot of sentence structure things I changed, but not nothing content-wise, obviously. You had a bit of a long sentence. Long sentences aren't you can. It's not that you can never open on a longer sentence. You can. I just changed it up a little bit. So instead of the harsh afternoon sun hit Leonid Harper's eyes as soon as he stepped off the Argentum Express, you've got two new words, Leonid Harper and Argentum Express. You want to try not to throw too much terminology at a reader in the beginning of a story than is necessary, certainly in the first sentence. So I just changed it to Leonid. We're going to say his last name later. We don't need those extra syllables right there right away. The afternoon sun assaulted, and assaulted is a good strong verb rather than hit. Hit's a good verb too, but assaulted's even stronger, right? And it gets the idea that, his eyes weren't ready for that. The afternoon sun assaulted Leonid's eyes the moment he stepped off the Argentum Express. And the moment he stepped off, not as soon as that moment has a more instantaneous, sound to it, puts us there in the moment with him. This phrase he says, I don't know it, Arum Sanguis or whatever, he muttered, jamming his derby hat onto his head to block the light. You had jamming his derby hat onto his head and adjusting it to block the light. And that's all a dependent clause on he muttered. So you had Arum Sanguis, he muttered, jamming his derby hat onto his head and adjusting it to block the light. Not a bad sentence. I mean, it's a perfectly grammatically correct sentence, but I just took out a clause I didn't think we really needed it. He put it on his hat to block the light. I thought that kind of told us what was going on without the extra syllables kind of cluttering it up. Let's see. This next one. So Leonid did his best to ignore the SkyTrain as he stepped off the runner and onto solid ground again, the metal monstrosity creaking ominously as weight shifted and the frame cooled. Not a bad sentence for, in terms of a long sentence, but then you follow it up with some long ones there too. In the recesses of his mind, Leonid knew exactly how much magic had driven the Express off the ground. That's a really long sentence. So I broke this up a bit. The metal monstrosity of the SkyTrain shifted and creaked as its frame cooled. All right. Good moderate sized sentence. We just open with that. Leonid did his best to ignore it. Now we followed up with a small, simple sentence, nice and small. In the recess of his mind, and now we get the longer sentence. He knew exactly how much magic had driven the Express off the ground in Leondale, how many sulfurite crystals had exhausted their fire to push it over the mountains to the head of the Measy River, and then end of the period there, period. And then I cut off that last bit as its own sentence as well. He knew exactly how much power now bled from the bottom of the cabin behind him in smoke and embers, wasted. I like how you got that word wasted tacked on the end there. That's great. Then I just changed some terminology because you said he knew because that same spark burned in the back of his mind. At this point in the story, I don't know what a spark is. See, in power, magic is supposed to be what our power of some sort. I'm guessing some sort of magic. Our power is what lifted the train off, or what helped the sky train fly and operate. And then you say that same spark. Is it a fire-based power? I don't know. I said that fire whispered in the back of his mind instead of the spark, because that just seemed like a stronger connection between the two descriptions. He could gather all that lost power together, and then I added the power, so likening it to that. You would go on to explain this, of course, if we could read the rest of your story, I'm sure, and we would get to know what kind of power and magic it is. Of course, this is just, the opening. We're not supposed to know. So I'm just trying to alter the language to a point where it doesn't trip us up until you get the chance to explain it to us, if that makes sense. The only other thing I will say, and I didn't change this because I didn't know if maybe there's a reason for it, but when you have a world that you're building like this, you want to be careful if you're made up names, if you have 2 made up names or 3 made up names that sound too similar without good reason. So his name is Leonid, and then he just got off the ground at Leondale. Now, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's his family home estate or something, and that's why it's called that. And if that's the case, then yeah, keep it in. But I've done that sometimes too. When I'm trying to make up names, I'll make up a name of a character, and then another character kind of starts with the same syllable or sound, or a place sounds a little similar. And it's just when you're making up names, you don't think about it on the cuff like that. But readers trying to keep track of all these new names you're throwing at them, that can stumble them up a little bit. So just a word, unless there's a good reason for it, like I said, his name being similar to the name of the, maybe it's his family estate or something like that. Unless it's something like that, then you might want to think about changing the name of the place there. But great, solid opening. Really would love to find out and read more of both of these stories. So you guys intrigued me. You got great content there. Just a matter of shaping it up a little bit, adding some specifics, and going in that manner. So let me check in with the chat there. Brian Gilmartin says that almost makes me want to take a crack at this writing stuff. Yeah, you should. You should, certainly. Absolutely. If you're, I think you're a member of the Facebook group, Ryan, and occasionally I'll post these, put these posts up if I'm going to do a writing lesson where I cover some people's samples. So definitely, you're welcome to do that. Back to the drawing board. Long sentences are a vice of mine. The terminology changes are good. The names are an unfortunate case of convergent evolution. Yeah, and that happens. That happens all the time. And all of these mistakes, I don't want anybody, and honestly, all of these, not mistakes, all of these things that I've, decided to improve upon or edit a little bit in tonight's samples, and certainly all the samples that we've had the last few weeks we've done this, all of these, things are so common in first drafts. If this is your first draft, or even, your first draft, your first time somebody else is looking at the draft, these are the types of things that you would expect to see in a writer's work. So none of this is at all should be discouraging in any way. All of these are the right types of mistakes to make. These are the right types of things that should be improved upon. Now, as you grow as a writer, you'll be able to focus in on one of these aspects or another, and maybe it won't be such an issue in your drafts anymore. But it's the nature of writing. Writing is a process. You will never, ever get to the point where you're so good you just sit down and write something and then it's awesome. That's not how writing works. I tell my students this all the time, and that's hard for perfectionists to get their mind across, because they feel like they need to get to that point, or they feel like it's not good if anybody can show them something that's wrong. But that's just the way the human brain writes, and the way we construct stories and tell stories. It's always been like that. Even back into the days where it was just an oral culture, and passing on stories orally in poem form and whatnot. They get adjusted based on audiences' responses and whatnot. And that's how it works. I think it was Leonardo da Vinci. I quote this from every now and then. He said, a piece of art is never finished. It's simply abandoned. And what he meant by that is he could sit there and you could tinker on whether he's doing a painting or whatever, or if you're doing a piece of writing, you can just get so bogged down into rewriting it and revising it that you never, ever let it go and let it get out there. And that's a thing that you don't want to do as well. And at some point you have to just let it go, but obviously it needs to be rewritten quite a bit and revised quite a bit before it gets to that point. But, even something that's published for 10 years and is a huge success, you hear writers like Stephen King and these people going back to their old works and like, I should have changed that. I should have changed that. Or they'll revise them up for new editions and stuff. So, that's just part of writing. Okay. Let me check on my time. Nope. Let me go ahead and do this quickly. So I'll get rid of that and stop that and see how the YouTube is once that catches up. Yeah, we're okay. We're sort of okay. So since time is getting a little slow here, I'm going to go ahead and read the opening of my story. I'm going to read about the first page of it, a little bit longer than just the first paragraph. This is the story that's going to be published in the third Eternity anthology from Firebringer Press, and I think that's going to be. It was supposed to be debuting this summer, but with all the stuff going on, we didn't get a chance to do that. So that's I think it's going to be moved to the fall or early winter. I don't know. But this is the opening of the story, and I'll certainly give you guys a link and stuff to follow that when it comes. But this is the story I've been telling you guys about. I think it's probably my favorite. I think it's my best short story, my best tale that I've ever written, actually. So let me go ahead and read this. This is titled "Girlfriend in the Basement." And pay attention to or you can see as an example, some of the details, concrete details, things used for people's imagery and whatnot. Robert and Vanessa returned from their honeymoon of scenic mountain views to an out-of-town airport and a 2-hour drive home. They arrived to find news vans parked before their lemon-yellow bungalow. Vanessa's mother shooed at cameramen standing in the tulip beds. Her father, still splattered with lemon-yellow paint, led the bewildered couple inside to shut out the crowd. 2 men waited in the living room. One wore a dark suit pressed against their peach couch. The other held a dolly containing a long wooden crate with Tigress Industries stamped on the top. The man with the suit stood and extended his hand. "Robert Sleater?" he asked. "Yes," Robert said, keeping his arms around Vanessa. "Mr. Sleater, I represent Lily Adams." Something dropped in Robert's throat. He felt Vanessa stiffen against him. "I'm afraid Miss Adams has taken some rather unorthodox measures," the man said, avoiding the couple's eyes. "She was recently diagnosed with a rare and fatal heart condition. So rare, in fact, that it attracted the interest of an overseas research facility. Tigris Industries has pioneered new breakthroughs in cryonic stasis. It's still a fuzzy area according to the law and jurisdiction. Sufficient to say she was able to qualify for Tigris' services. Her body will be preserved now, typically until such time as medical science can find a cure for her condition. Miss Adams complicated matters, however, with a revised will and advance directive. As far as her estate is concerned, she's considered deceased, but she still has the rights of a patient in her current condition. Vanessa traded her husband's side for her father's, leaving the sweat against Robert's ribs to cool in her absence. What does this have to do with me? Robert asked. He looked at Vanessa. I haven't spoken with Lily in over a year. In Miss Adams' will, she left her preserved body to you, the man said, gesturing to the wooden crate, which makes you responsible for her care as a patient. Vanessa buried her head in her father's shoulder. Her advance directive, the man continued, states she is to be revived only in the event that you divorce your wife and sign a form of intent to wed Miss Adams. I'm taking you home, Vanessa's father said, turning her toward the door. But when it opened onto the eager faces of reporters, Vanessa made a sharp turn. No, she said. That's what she wants. Vanessa walked over to the wooden crate, but she's not going to get it. She looked at the man holding the dolly. Put her in the basement. I'll need a power source, man, Ma'am, the man answered. I said in the basement. And then we got a little ellipsis there because that's a break in time is about to happen. But that is the first little chunk of the story there, girlfriend in the basement. So that will come in the third, what's it called? There's been Somewhere in the Middle of Eternity, Elsewhere in the Middle of Eternity, and this one's going to be called Meanwhile in the Middle of Eternity. Speculative fiction anthology from Firebringer Press, which will be coming out at some point. It's all finished. They're just waiting for a good release date. But you can see some of the details, the concrete adjectives, the colors, the lemon yellow bungalow, the peach couch, the two men, stuff like that. Things that would be easier for people to visualize in their mind. And specifically, I don't know if you caught it, but I'm playing with a little bit of Garden of Eden imagery there. They return back to this place. It's all these fruit colors and everything like that. And that line about Vanessa left her husband's side for her father's, leaving the sweat against his ribs to cool in her absence. And, Eve taken from Adam's rib. And then, of course, Lily, if you know not actual biblical theology, but Jewish mythology, is that Lilith was the first, woman created or whatever who wasn't obedient and therefore was banished or whatever before Eve was created. Not actual biblical religion, but just a Jewish myth or anything that took hold. So that's just playing with some of those ideas there, but playing with them in the sense of or with those details, with those colors and numbers and stuff like that for you to get the hang of. So